Send the greeting protocol again, Admiral Zex-427 commanded, his four tendrils twitching with barely contained frustration. And someone please explain to me why these humans keep laughing every time we address their leadership structure. The bridge of the Galactic Research Vessel Knowledge Seeker hummed with nervous energy as the crew attempted, for the fourth time, to properly greet the human military vessel that had appeared on their scanners. The massive ship, designated as UNSS Hippocrates, loomed in their view screen like a particularly intimidating space whale. Respected High Commander Supreme Ultimate Leader Bright, the communications officer began, following their carefully researched protocol. We, the humble servants of the Galactic Research Coalition, request permission to. The transmission was cut short by what the aliens could only classify as poorly suppressed snickering from the human vessel. Zex slumped in his command chair, all six eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of extreme annoyance in his species. They're responding, Admiral, the comms officer announced, straightening his ceremonial knowledge-seeking tentacles. The human's face appeared on screen, and despite what their research had indicated was a serious military situation, the person was wearing what appeared to be an amused grin. This is Commander Bright of the UNSS Hippocrates. Please, just Commander is fine. No need for the creative titles. Zex leaned forward, consulting his data pad. But our research indicates humans place extreme importance on proper titles. We have documented 17 different ranks, 32 specialized position names, and 93 unofficial but apparently critical designations. Commander Bright's grin widened. Well, you're not wrong about that. But maybe we could. Captain on deck, someone shouted from the human vessel, and Zex watched in fascination as Commander Bright suddenly straightened and turned. This must be their true leader, Zex thought. Finally, we'll see the proper protocol. Hey Bright, got those reports? I asked. For a human female in what appeared to be entirely white garments strolled into view, casually sipping from a container that emitted steam. Zex's research team frantically began taking notes. The white garments must denote supreme authority. But wait, where were the ranking insignias? The ceremonial medals? The mandatory 17 badges of office that their research suggested all human leaders wore? Right here, Doc, Commander Bright replied, holding up a data pad. And, we've got some visitors. The woman turned toward the screen, and Zex noticed something peculiar. The bridge crew of the human vessel seemed to be standing slightly straighter, their eyes tracking the woman's movement with an intensity that suggested fear? Respect? Both? Oh, wonderful, she exclaimed. I've been hoping to meet some of our galactic neighbors. I'm Dr. Martinez, Chief Medical Officer of the Hippocrates, but everyone just calls me Doc. Zex's translator assistant yanked on his sleeve. Sir, according to our database, Doctor is not even a military rank, but Commander Bright appears to be, deferring to her. This contradicts all our research on human chain of command. Noted, Zex replied weakly, realizing that perhaps their extensive research into human military structure might have missed something rather important. Very, very carefully noted. This defies all logical analysis. Professor Yun declared, their crystalline form shimmering with academic distress as they paced the research deck of the knowledge seeker. Observed the data pattern. When Ensign Davis dropped a data pad, 3 higher-ranking officers rushed to help, but when Lieutenant Colonel Thompson stumbled, everyone pretended not to notice. Admiral Zex sat at the observation station, watching the feed from their cultural exchange program with the Hippocrates. 2 weeks into their joint mission, and the alien research team was no closer to understanding the bizarre human command structure. Perhaps we should compile a new ranking chart, Chief Science Officer Kip suggested, their tentacles forming complex mathematical equations in the air. Look at this morning's observations. A sergeant called Lance told a captain to, and I quote, "Put down that wrench before you hurt yourself, sir." The captain complied immediately. The research team's collective attention turned to their holographic display, where they'd attempted to map out the human hierarchy. It looked less like an organizational chart and more like a plate of Earth spaghetti, a dish that had caused similar confusion during their first cultural dinner exchange. Add this to the anomaly list, Zex commanded, pointing to a new data point. Officer Sarah Martinez, designated as Doc, just ordered the entire engineering department to, what was the phrase? Drop and give her 20. Even the chief engineer complied without question. Professor Yun's crystals turned a deep shade of purple, the equivalent of a human headache. But she's not even in the engineering chain of command. And what exactly were they giving her? I counted 20 vertical body movements, but no physical transfer of items occurred. The door to the research deck swooshed open, admitting Lieutenant Rex Palmer, their human liaison officer. The aliens had specifically requested a simple lieutenant to help them understand military structure, assuming a lower-ranked officer would be easier to comprehend. They couldn't have been more wrong. "How's the research going?" Rex asked, grinning at the chaos of holographic charts and scattered data pads. "Lieutenant Palmer." Zex began formally. "We require clarification on several points. First, why does everyone call Specialist Rodriguez chief when he's clearly not a chief petty officer? Second, why does Commander Bright stop whatever he's doing when Doc merely raises an eyebrow? And third, what is a butter bar, and why did 3 people call you that yesterday?" Rex's grin widened. "Well, Rodriguez keeps the coffee machine running, so he's chief of caffeine. Unofficial title, but sacred duty. As for Doc, well, let's just say nobody wants to be on her bad side during physical examinations. And butter bar." He pointed to his rank insignia. "Single gold bar looks like a pat of butter. It's what they call new lieutenants." Professor Yun's crystals nearly shattered from the stress. But, our database shows 17 official terms for lieutenant ranks. Why add an informal designation based on dairy products?" "Oh, that's nothing," Rex chuckled. "Wait until you hear about Top Sarge Skipper, an old man, though maybe don't call Commander Bright that last one to his face." Zex's tendrils curled in despair. "Are you saying there's an entire unofficial ranking system based on nicknames?" "More like multiple systems that sometimes overlap," Rex explained, helping himself to the alien equivalent of coffee, a glowing blue liquid that tasted like mathematical equations. "There's the official ranks, department hierarchies, unofficial titles, situational authority, and then there's Doc." "What makes this Doc so special?" Chief Science Officer Kip demanded, their tentacles forming question marks. "You really want to know?" Rex asked, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Word is, last year during the Centauri campaign, an admiral tried to override her medical decision about launching fighters during a viral outbreak. Doc just looked at him and said, 'Sir, would you like me to schedule your prostate exam for right now?' The admiral backed down so fast he nearly broke the sound barrier." The alien researchers stared at him in horror and fascination. Professor Yun began frantically updating their charts, adding a new category labeled Medical Authority Override Protocols. Terrifying. "But that's not even a proper use of military authority," Zex protested. Rex shrugged. "Welcome to human ranks, where the titles are made up and the protocols only matter until Doc says otherwise." The observation log of Admiral Zex-427, third cycle of human military research, read like a thriller novel written by a particularly confused bureaucrat. 0800 hours. Commander Bright postponed critical mission briefing because Doc said, and I quote, "Those blood pressure readings aren't going to take themselves, Commander." 0900 hours. Master Chief Petty Officer Henderson, decorated veteran of 3 wars, literally ran in the opposite direction when Doc emerged from medical bay with a needle. 1000 hours. Witnessed Doc override a rear admiral's order with 2 raised eyebrows and the words, "Remember your last physical." Zex reviewed these notes for the 100th time, his tendrils twitching in synchronized confusion. On the research deck's main screen, live footage showed Doc walking through the Hippocrates corridors. The aliens watched in fascination as hardened military personnel practically tripped over themselves to appear healthy in her presence. "Most peculiar," Professor Yun observed, their crystalline form vibrating with academic excitement. "Notice how Squadron Leader Chen quickly hid that candy bar when Doc rounded the corner. Yet according to regulations, there's no dietary restrictions during off-duty hours." Chief Science Officer Kip's tentacles formed complex probability equations. "Perhaps she possesses some form of mind control? Our scans show she's a standard human, but her influence defies logical explanation." "She made a general do jumping jacks yesterday," Lieutenant Rex commented from his corner, where he'd been helping the aliens with their research. Said she was concerned about his cardiovascular health. The alien researchers turned to him in horror. But that violates at least 15 protocols about rank authority," Professor Yun sputtered, crystals flashing in distress. "You think that's bad?" Rex grinned. "Last month, she ordered the entire Marine contingent to take vitamins. Even the colonel in charge just said yes, Doc, and lined up like a rookie at boot camp." Zex's data pad pinged with a new observation. Alert. Doc approaching Captain Stevens with what appears to be a medical tricorder. The aliens crowded around the screen, watching the scene unfold with scientific fascination and mild terror. Captain Stevens' Doc's voice came through clearly on their monitors. "I couldn't help but notice you missed your annual physical last week." The captain, A decorated officer known for facing down hostile alien armadas without flinching, suddenly developed an intense interest in his boots. Been busy with tactical drills, Doc. Very busy. Extremely busy. Really, Doc's voice carried enough skepticism to fill a medical textbook. Too busy for a quick checkup? Perhaps we should do it right here in the corridor? I'm sure these nice alien researchers would love to observe human medical procedures. I'll be in Med Bay in 5 minutes, Captain Stevens promised. Retreating with what the aliens noted was definitely not a tactical withdrawal, no matter how much it looked like one. Fascinating, Professor Yun whispered. Even with no official command authority, she wields more practical power than most of the command staff. Add this to the database, Kip called out excitedly. 1,147 hours witness doc review crew fitness reports. Commander Bright offered her his command chair without being asked. She accepted this as completely normal. Rex leaned back in his chair, enjoying the alien's growing bewilderment. You want to know the real kicker? Last year during the Orion crisis, we had 4 different admirals on board. Big emergency meeting about deployment strategies. Doc walked in, said the ventilation system needed to be shut down for decontamination, and you know what happened. The aliens leaned forward eagerly. All 4 admirals picked up their stuff and moved to a smaller conference room without a single complaint. One of them even thanked her. Zex's tendrils went limp with shock. But our research indicates admirals don't move for anyone. There are 17 separate regulations about maintaining command presence. Oh, it gets better, Rex continued, clearly enjoying himself. During that same crisis, Doc caught an admiral trying to skip meals due to stress. Know what she did? Followed him around with a sandwich until he ate it. Called it preventative medicine. Professor Yun's crystals were practically strobing with confusion. The power dynamics make no sense. She's simultaneously outside the chain of command, yet somehow at the top of it. Watch this, Rex pointed to the screen, where Doc was approaching a group of young officers who were definitely not sleeping in the recreation area. This is going to be good. Well, Doc's voice carried that unique tone that the aliens had learned to classify as deceptively casual. If you have time to nap, you have time for booster shots. Med Bay, 10 minutes. The officers scattered like startled cadets, suddenly remembering urgent duties elsewhere. A record that Zex commanded. Classification unauthorized but highly effective use of medical authority for crew management. Should we create a new category, Professor Yun suggested. Perhaps informal authority structures medical intimidation division. Don't forget to note that no one ever files complaints about these interventions, Rex added helpfully. Well, except for that one admiral who tried. Funny story, actually, his next physical somehow got scheduled for 0400 hours every day for a week. The aliens watched as Doc continued her rounds, the crew parting before her like a small tide of very health-conscious water. She carried no weapons, wore no command insignia, and technically held no military rank. Yet somehow, she wielded more practical authority than anyone else on the ship. I believe Zex announced gravely, we may need to completely revise our understanding of human military hierarchy. His tendrils formed the alien equivalent of a headache. And perhaps send a warning to the Galactic Council about the true power structure in human space forces. Oh, Professor Yun asked, what warning would that be? Simple, Zex replied. In case of diplomatic incidents, don't bother with the admirals. Go straight to Doc. Red alert klaxons shattered the routine of deep space observation, catching both the knowledge seeker and the Hippocrates in their piercing wail. Admiral Zex's research team had barely registered the threat when 3 pirate vessels dropped out of hyperspace, their weapons already charging. Fascinating, Professor Yun exclaimed, their crystals pulsing with excited terror. Our first opportunity to observe human combat protocols in action. Quick, activate all research feeds. The Hippocrates bridge erupted into controlled chaos. Commander Bright snapped orders with practiced efficiency, but the alien observers noticed something far more interesting. Doc had quietly appeared on the bridge, and no one seemed surprised. Battle stations observed, multiple casualties expected, Kip narrated for their research log. Doc has assumed position near emergency medical console. Note command staff keeps glancing in her direction. Correction, command staff keeps glancing nervously in her direction. The first volley from the pirates rocked both ships. The knowledge seekers' shields held, but the Hippocrates took a glancing blow to their port side. Damage report, Commander Bright demanded. Engineering deck hit, sir, came the response. Casualties reported in sections 7 through 9. And then the aliens witnessed something extraordinary. Doc stepped forward, and the entire bridge dynamic shifted like gravity had suddenly changed direction. "Commander," she said, her voice carrying that special tone that made admirals eat their vegetables, "I need a clear path to engineering. Now." Commander Bright didn't even hesitate. "Tactical, concentrate fire on the nearest pirate vessel. Clear that debris field. Nobody delays Doc getting to her patients." The Hippocrates main guns roared to life, not just returning fire but systematically obliterating anything that might slow down the medical team's progress through the ship. Are they restructuring their entire battle strategy around Doc's medical requirements? Zex asked incredulously. "Confirmed," Professor Yun replied, crystals flickering with revelation. "They're not just fighting the pirates, they're actively creating optimal conditions for medical response." The research team watched in fascination as Doc strode through the ship's corridors, her medical team falling in behind her like a well-trained honor guard. Crew members pressed themselves against walls to let them pass, some offering quick status reports that Doc acknowledged with short nods. "Listen to this command sequence," Kip's tentacles waved excitedly. Engineering just diverted power from secondary weapons to increase corridor lighting along Doc's route, without being asked. Another blast rocked the ship. Through their observation feeds, the aliens watched Doc reach the injured crew members. What happened next would require 17 appendices in their final report. Chief Martinez, a young engineer, gasped, clutching a nasty plasma burn. "The coolant system. We need to." "You need to lie still and let me treat that burn," Doc interrupted. "Already working." Lieutenant Palmer, Rex, who had somehow materialized beside her, despite being on a different deck moments ago, snapped to attention. "Yes, Doc." "Tell Commander Bright I need this section stabilized. These patients can't be moved yet, and I won't have firefights in my operating space." Rex didn't even question the order. Neither did Commander Bright when he received it. The Hippocrates suddenly shifted all its firepower to create a protective bubble around the damaged engineering section. "Remarkable," Professor Yun exclaimed. "The entire tactical situation is being dictated by medical requirements. This completely contradicts standard military doctrine across 17 known species." They watched as Doc worked on her patients, somehow simultaneously treating injuries, directing her medical team, and terrifying junior officers into perfect assistance. When a stray shot caused a nearby panel to spark, 3 security officers literally dove to form a human shield between the sparks and Doc's medical procedures. "The price of victory is steep," Zex murmured philosophically, but apparently not as steep as ignoring Doc's medical protocols. The battle raged on for another 20 minutes, but to the alien observers, it was clear that the real command center wasn't on the bridge, it was wherever Doc happened to be standing. When she declared an area a medical zone, it became better protected than the ship's bridge. When she needed resources, entire weapon systems were temporarily powered down to provide them. Finally, the last pirate ship fled, leaving the Hippocrates battered but victorious. The alien research team huddled around their data, trying to make sense of what they'd witnessed. Traditional analysis suggests the ship's defense should have prioritized tactical advantages, Professor Yun said, reviewing their notes. Instead, they restructured their entire combat response around medical accessibility. "Not just medical accessibility," Kip corrected, "tentacles forming complex patterns. Doc accessibility. Did you notice? When the junior medical officer suggested a treatment plan, the crew waited for Doc's approval before acting." "The implications are staggering," Zex declared. "We've been approaching this all wrong. The human military doesn't just respect medical authority, they've integrated it into their core combat doctrine." Rex, who had returned to the knowledge seeker for the post-battle debrief, nodded sagely. "You should see what happens when Doc declares a quarantine. Last year, she locked down the officer's mess because of a flu outbreak. Even the Admiral had to eat combat rations in his quarters. But surely," Professor Yun began. "He said thank you when she lifted the quarantine," Rex added with a grin. Zex's tendrils formed the alien equivalent of a thoughtful stroke of the chin. "Perhaps we should revise our first contact protocols. Clearly, establishing medical authority is more crucial than we realized." Oh, Rex raised an eyebrow. "Yes," Zex replied seriously. "Current protocol calls for addressing the highest-ranking military officer first, but now we understand in any crisis situation, the most important question isn't who's in command, it's where's Doc. Attention crew members of the Knowledge Seeker." Chief Medical Officer Zip announced, trying to capture Doc's signature tone of casual authority. "I have noticed several of you skipping your mandatory mineral baths. This is Unacceptable. The alien crew simply waved their various appendages in acknowledgement and continued their tasks. No one ran away. No one suddenly remembered urgent appointments. No one even flinched. Admiral Zex watched the failed attempt from his command chair, all 6 eyes blinking in disappointment. Perhaps you need to raise your eyebrows more threateningly, he suggested, then remembered their species didn't have eyebrows. I do not understand, Zip complained, their medical tentacles drooping. I followed the human protocol exactly. I even practiced what the humans call the disappointed parent look in the mirror for 3 hours. Professor Yun's crystals flickered with academic frustration. Clearly, we're missing some crucial element. Officer Palmer, what are we doing wrong? Rex, who had been trying very hard not to laugh, cleared his throat. Well, for starters, your medical officer just asked permission from 3 different departments before giving someone a bandage. Of course they did, Zex protested. That's proper protocol. We need authorization forms in triplicate for any medical procedure, filed with 17 different. Doc once treated a plasma burn while hanging upside down in a Jeffries tube during a firefight, Rex interrupted. Pretty sure she didn't fill out any forms first. The aliens collectively shuddered at such a flagrant violation of proper documentation procedures. Watch and learn, Rex suggested, pointing to their main view screen where Doc was conducting her daily rounds on the Hippocrates. They observed as Doc walked past a group of Marines doing exercises. Without breaking stride, she called out, Thompson, that knee is bothering you again. Med bay after your workout. No excuses, or I'll find you. The burly Marine sergeant just nodded meekly. See, Rex said. Direct, confident, and just a hint of omniscient medical awareness. Zip straightened their medical tentacles and tried again. Crewman Yix, I observed that your third arm is moving 5% slower than regulation standard. Report to Medical Bay 4. Please, if you're not too busy. We're definitely missing something, Professor Yun muttered. Their crystalline form dims with confusion. Perhaps we need to implement some human medical traditions? Officer Palmer, what is this prostate exam that seems to strike terror into your highest-ranking officers? Rex choked on his coffee. Let's maybe not start there. The aliens made 17 more attempts to replicate Doc's authority over the next few days. Each failure was more spectacular than the last. Zip tried lurking around corners with a medical scanner, but only managed to get themselves tangled in their own tentacles. Professor Yun attempted to create a medical override code, but ended up accidentally ordering 17 cases of alien antiseptic wipes instead. Even Admiral Zex gave it a shot, trying to order his tactical officer to eat more minerals, only to have the officer present a 70-page dissertation on proper mineral consumption protocols. I don't understand, Zip finally exclaimed in frustration. We have better equipment, more advanced procedures, and 17 separate medical certification programs. Why can't we achieve the same results? Rex watched as Doc, visible on their screen, reduced a hardened combat veteran to stammers just by asking about his caffeine intake. Maybe that's the problem, he suggested. You're thinking about it as a system to be replicated. But Doc's more like a force of nature. Like your Earth hurricanes, Professor Yun asked hopefully. More like gravity, Rex replied. Always there, unavoidable, and really bad for your health if you try to ignore it. The aliens watched as Doc cornered Commander Bright in a corridor, armed with nothing but a medical tricorder and raised eyebrows. The commander immediately began explaining why he'd been working triple shifts, before she even asked. Fascinating, Zex mused. So the power doesn't come from the position. It comes from the Doc, Rex finished with a grin. And maybe some things in the universe just can't be replicated. Zip's medical tentacles drooped in final acceptance. Perhaps we should just update our medical protocols to include the phrase, when in doubt, ask Doc. Now you're getting it, Rex laughed. Though maybe add a footnote and hope she's in a good mood. After extensive research into human military hierarchy, I must recommend immediate revisions to our first contact protocols. Our previous understanding was, to put it mildly, incomplete. Please find below our key findings and recommendations. The official chain of command in human military vessels is more of a suggestion than a rule, particularly when it encounters what we now classify as the Doc phenomenon. Traditional power structures can be instantly overridden by medical authority, especially when wielded by someone known as Doc. Note we have yet to determine if this is a rank, a title, or a warning label.
Critical update: in any diplomatic situation, identifying the ship's dock should take priority over communicating with official command staff. The Doc's corporation will ensure all other interactions proceed smoothly, or at least with minimal medical complications.
Our attempts to replicate this system have failed spectacularly. My chief medical officer is still trying to remove themselves from the ceiling after their last attempt at what humans call medical intimidation. Recommendation: all future diplomatic missions should include at least 17 different types of chocolate. Our research indicates this is the only substance that consistently works as a peace offering when Doc is displeased. Admiral Zex paused in his dictation as Lieutenant Rex entered the bridge, grinning as usual. "Finishing up your report." Almost Zex replied, his tendrils forming questioning shapes. "Though I still have one last query. During the battle, I heard several crew members refer to someone as Cookie. Given our new understanding of informal authority structures, should we be concerned about another hidden power center?" Rex's grin widened. "Oh, that's just what everyone calls our head chef. Though now that you mention it." Yes, Professor Yoon's crystals pulsed with academic interest.
Well, Cookie is the only person on board who can tell Doc to sit down and eat something, and she actually does it.
There was a moment of profound silence on the alien bridge. Belay that last report, Zex announced frantically. New subject line: urgent discovery of previously unknown super-authority in human military structure. "You know," Rex mused thoughtfully, "wait until you hear about what happens when Cookie and Doc team up during Mandatory Nutrition Week."
The sound of 17 data pads hitting the floor echoed across the bridge, followed by Professor Yoon's crystals chiming in distress.
"Add final addendum," Zex whispered weakly. "In case of diplomatic crisis, locate Doc. In case of Doc crisis, locate Cookie. In case they're working together, surrender immediately. End report." As if to punctuate his words, Doc's voice came through their still open channel to the Hippocrates now. "About that food replicator in your medical bay. Cookie and I have some concerns." Zex's tendrils formed the alien equivalent of a whimper. Some mysteries of human military structure, he decided, were perhaps better left unexplored.